Joe. Thank you for your kind introduction, for all of your support, and thank you all for making time to come out and hang out with us on Labor Day, of all days. Hope you guys had a good day, good weekend. I want to say a quick thank you also to the Barrel House General Manager Brian and the Manager Andrew. Thanks for having us here today. They're probably working in the back. Let's give them a round of applause. And I want to say thanks to the Scott County Democrats for helping to get the word out about this. It's great to be here in Davenport. We've been having a lot of folks say, hey, when do you come into Davenport? I'm so happy that we are here. We're having this town hall. And on Labor Day of all days. It's a great long weekend, but I really love what this day actually stands for, what we're talking about. Because it's something that we talk about all the time, but it gives us a moment just to pause and celebrate people in this country. American workers, people all across this country, every single day, get up early, stay up late, work that third shift all night long, the working people who are the engine of this country, fueling our economy. Unsung heroes, in my view. People whose voices are too often not heard, but people who deserve to be championed. People whose needs must be met. And so, in every one of my talks, I always talk about a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. And days like today represent one of the many reasons why this is so important. One of the many reasons why this is so important, because we see what happens at the federal level as well as at the state level, what happens when we don't have this. Because what do we have right now? Government of, by, and for the rich and powerful. Government of, by, and for corporate special interests. Government of, by, and for self-serving politicians. Everything but a government of, by, and for the people. And so what happens? We all get left out as a result. People suffer as a result. You see so many examples of this through the different policies that Congress is passing, how they're being written, who's influencing the writing of those laws. And we can go down issue by issue, the things that we most care about as people, and how really our interests are not being served. Feel free to come and go as you guys need to. I don't want to get in the way of you guys doing your job. Healthcare. Let's start with healthcare, because I know everywhere I go, this is an issue that I hear is top of mind for most people. We know a few facts for certain. Our country spends far more on healthcare than any other country in the world. We spend far more on healthcare than any other country in the world, yet we have worse outcomes. How does that happen in the United States of America? Well, it happens when you have big insurance and big pharma with a seat at the table, right next to lawmakers, their lobbyists actually helping to write these laws, increasing and driving up their profits, without any connection to better outcomes for the people. You know, we look at the Affordable Care Act and we see there is some good that was done with it, but the bottom line is big insurance and big pharma had a big hand in writing that legislation. So we've seen their profits skyrocket, even as we still have tens of millions of Americans in this country who either completely lack health insurance, therefore don't have that safety net, or they have quote-unquote coverage, but they're underinsured. And I've got friends of mine who are in this situation. They can't afford anything but the very highest deductibles. So they've got like a $2,500 deductible, meaning if there's an emergency, their kid's got to go to the ER, mom or dad gets sick, they can't afford it. It's one healthcare emergency away from bankruptcy. How does this happen? How does it happen that we have seniors who can't afford their prescription drugs? Because Medicare is not allowed to negotiate with the prescription drug companies to bring those costs down. What do we see as a result? Prescription drug companies price gouging people, raising their costs by hundreds or even sometimes thousands of %, even with especially with life-saving drugs. pause for a moment and think about how terribly wrong this is. That we have people who are depending on these medicines for their lives, and yet prescription drug companies are allowed to run away with the costs. Something that you could run over to Canada and get the very same drug at multiple times cheaper. Insulin is one that I've talked with a lot of people about who are dependent on insulin, people with diabetes, and they're not able to get it because they can't afford it anymore here. How does this happen? It happens when we have a government of, by, and for the rich and powerful. We have our healthcare policies being written by the corporations who benefit most from them, leaving we the people behind. This is why it's so important, in my view, that we pass legislation like Medicare for All, making sure that we have healthcare, quality healthcare for everyone who needs it, regardless of how much or little money is in your pocket. While also making sure if those who have unions who've got great negotiated healthcare plans, if they want to keep their plan, they can. But no matter what happens, every single American is guaranteed that quality healthcare. Now, we've been talking about this a lot, and I was at a county fair in Nashua last night. I was talking with some farmers there who said, but how do we pay for this? How do we afford it? And I said, you're already paying for it, except you're paying way more right now. And what you're paying is going to drive up the profits of these big corporate insurance companies, rather than paying less for quality care and still being able to see your doctor in your community. This is what we're talking about. We're already paying for it. The opportunity for us is we can pay less, bring down that overhead that's going straight to the bottom line of these corporate insurance companies, and still get that quality care that we deserve. Let's talk about climate change, which is another major issue that I know a lot of us are concerned about, our environment. It's really sad that in Washington, when you talk about climate change, and maybe even in some of the conversations you're having, you're either a climate believer or a climate denier. It's become such a divisive thing, when really there's nothing more unifying. Because what we're talking about really is clean air, clean water, protecting our home, the places we love, nature, and having a safe place for our kids and their kids and their kids to grow up in. Is that a Republican issue? No. Is it a Democrat issue? No, it's a people issue. Who can live without water? Nobody. None of us. Our planet can't live without water. Who can live without clean air? We can't. These are things that are basic to every single one of us. And if we begin to have these conversations with people, bridge those divides and say, hey, let's just talk as people. I don't care what your political affiliation is. Let's just talk as people and figure out how do we solve these problems together. Because it's just as important for my family as it is for yours. Why have we not already made the kinds of changes we need to see in this? Whether we're talking about transitioning off of fossil fuels, I've introduced legislation that would accomplish that. It's the most ambitious climate change legislation ever introduced in Congress. It has an actionable plan that will transition us off of fossil fuels, and the nearly $30 billion a year that's coming out of our pockets, going to the fossil fuel companies, end that, and instead invest in a clean, renewable energy economy. Create good paying jobs. Help to transition our workforce into this economy of our future. And in doing so, help to protect our home. So this legislation hasn't gotten a hearing yet. Hasn't come up for a vote yet. Why is that? Well, it's bigger than that. It's bigger than that. The problem is the influence of big money and special interests in our politics. When you see serious pieces of legislation like this, they should be before us in the Democratic House of Representatives, but they're not yet. The influence of these lobbyists. I've been vocal in criticizing our National Democratic Party for taking big fossil fuel money. How can you be serious about climate change when you're getting money from the very people who are fighting it? A government of, by, and for the rich and powerful is corrupting the very essence of what our government is supposed to be. You know, Abraham Lincoln spoke those words of a government of, by, and for the people. It's something that we've heard throughout our lives, but never before has it been such a pressing call to action. Because we are seeing the very direct impacts in our everyday lives of the failure to accomplish that. The failure to truly have a government that is hearing our voices, representing our issues, and fighting to solve the challenges that we face together. Criminal justice reform. This is an issue where there's great opportunity because there's bipartisan support. We have progressives and conservatives coming together and saying, we've got to reform a broken criminal justice system. It's hurting people, it's tearing apart families, and it's costing us as taxpayers a lot of money. We have overcrowded prisons all across this country. And oh, by the way, we are paying for-profit private prisons to keep their beds full, to keep their cells full. How does that serve the interests of us as taxpayers? How does that serve the interests of the people of this country? It doesn't. It serves one purpose. The bottom line for those corporations who run those private prisons. They're not at all interested in reducing recidivism rates. They're not at all interested in actually helping rehabilitate or get folks ready to transition back into their communities, back into their families. Our system is broken, and this is something we've got to fix. And there's a few very simple things we can do right away. End private prisons. Get rid of them. We've got to end this cash bail system that is so unjust and that punishes the poor, people who don't have the cash in their pockets to pay that bail, even before they've gone through any kind of justice system, before they've gotten their due process. They've got to sit in a cell. What is their crime? Because they're poor. Yet you've got people, and a lot of names in the headlines recently, wealthy people, rich people, millionaires, billionaires, because they're rich. They can pay that bail, go back to their lives, and they benefit off of this system. We've got to end the failed war on drugs. End the federal marijuana prohibition that's torn so many people apart, taking them away from their families, and giving them a criminal record that they don't deserve. I've introduced the only bipartisan legislation in Congress to end the federal marijuana prohibition because, like every other issue you've talked about, this is not about partisanship. This is about people. This is about people. You hear a lot of folks rightly concerned about the opioid epidemic that is taking people's lives, ruining people's lives. It is truly an epidemic that we should all be concerned about and that we all need to take action to address. How do we do this? One thing that has been proven is that in states where they've legalized either medicinal or recreational marijuana, there's been a direct correlation and a reduction of opioid addiction and opioid-related deaths. You've seen people who are seeking medicine in other ways and stepping away from those highly addictive opioids. This can't continue so long as the federal government is looming over our heads saying, well, you are threatened by federal prosecution because marijuana is still listed as a Schedule I drug, just like heroin. We need sentencing reform. We need further prison reform. These are all things that will do so much to help us reform this broken system. Immigration reform. Why is it that we have not yet made progress in Washington to deal with this crisis that's at our border, that's torn children away from their parents, as well as the crisis that exists within our legal immigration system? I was reading an article recently that talked about how some folks who are seeking to enter our country legally and seeking a green card to do so will have to wait on average something like 157 years to get it. What? That's what I said. I had to reread this a few times over, really? But our legal immigration system is so broken that it's impacting the illegal immigration that's happening in this country. It's not working for the American people. It's It's not working for our families. Those who have family members in other countries just want to come and visit their families. It's not working for our economy. People who have jobs that need to be filled, they want to be able to bring in either skilled workers or those to fill these positions. It's not working for anybody. This is something that, again, has bipartisan support. So why has it not been solved? Political interests, partisan interests. People who are putting party instead of solving the problem, putting party first instead of actually solving the problems that are before us. So we can keep going down this list, but to me, all of this gets back to the center of those who are not putting the well-being of our people in our country first. This is what our campaign is about changing this, bringing about this systemic change that's bigger than just defeating Donald Trump. Don't get me wrong, I'm in this race to beat Trump in 2020. But we cannot be naive to think that all of the problems that we are facing began the day after the election in November of 2016. People were struggling in this country before that. Families were suffering. A lot of the problems we're talking about have persisted over years, if not decades. So if we're serious about making the kind of real change and big change we're talking about, we've got to understand the current situation. We've got to understand the root cause of these problems and come together as a country to solve them. This is bigger than Democrats versus Republicans. We can't play these team games or these tribal wars anymore. We are the American people. We stand as one. We stand united with each other, understanding that united we stand, divided we fall. So we have no choice but to forge ahead together. Not being afraid of our differences, recognizing that there is strength in that. That we can agree to disagree on issues, maybe a few, maybe a lot of issues, but if our motivation is coming from a place of love for our country, that pride we have as Americans and the principles and ideals that we strive towards to bring about that more perfect union, then anything is possible. Then we can really solve the challenges that we face. Putting that principle of service above self at the forefront of what we do. And this is the leadership that I'm seeking to bring. This is why I'm running for president, to bring those principles that are in this soldier's heart of putting service above self, for love of country and love of our people, so that we can truly come together and move forward towards that brighter future that we deserve, that our children deserve, not only for us today, but for generations to come. There's an issue that's central to the rest of all of these that we've talked about that I want to bring up because it too often goes unnoticed, and that is the cost of war. In order to have the resources that we need to address the needs of the people in our country, we have to deal with the cost of war and the toll that it takes on our country. I've served in the Army National Guard for over 16 years. I've deployed twice to the Middle East, and I've seen firsthand the high human cost of war. Toll that it takes on my brothers and sisters in uniform. Those who paid the ultimate price. Those who did not make that trip home. Those who did, some coming home with both visible and invisible wounds to stay with them forever. These are things that we will never leave behind. But what people don't often realize is that the cost of war is paid for by every single one of you, whether you've worn the uniform or not. How? How is that possible? Trillions of our hard-earned taxpayer dollars have been going since 9/11 alone to pay for these wars. Counterproductive regime change wars that have made our country less safe, that have strengthened terrorist groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda, that have cost us tremendously in human lives, that have made things worse for the people in the countries where we wage these wars, and have taken these dollars out of our schools, out of our healthcare system, out of our communities, out of our roads. Right now, We are continuing to spend $4 billion every month in Afghanistan. $4 billion every month in Afghanistan. If you think about, that's just one piece. That's one small piece of how much we're spending in many different countries. How much we've spent over the last several years. And what could we do with that? What could we do with that? Where could we put that money towards? I was meeting with a group of mayors from across the country not too long ago, and I was sharing these numbers with them, and they were just astounded because for them, you know, they're dealing with potholes and sewers and water, basic infrastructure, parks, law enforcement, firefighters. They depend every year on an important piece of funding that comes from the federal government. Now, this grant that goes to every city and county, they get $3 billion every year to split up nationwide. Nationwide. So whether it's a small town or a big city, everyone gets a little piece of that $3 billion pie once a year. Meanwhile, $4 billion a month goes to Afghanistan. So that gives you a little bit of context about how screwed up our country's priorities have been and are, and why they need to change. Why they need to change. This is not about being an isolationist. It's not about turning our back on the world. This is about making the right decisions and making sure that our country is a force for good in the world. A force for good. This is why I'm running for president, to end these wasteful regime change wars. Work to end this new Cold War that we're in with escalating tensions between the United States and other nuclear-armed countries like Russia and China. This nuclear arms race that this president has sparked off when he's torn up important treaties that have made our country more safe, that were negotiated over 3 decades ago. Work to end this arms race and make sure that we are dedicating our resources, our precious taxpayer dollars, and investing in serving the needs of our people right here at home. That's where it belongs. And this is important because the most important responsibility the president has is to serve as commander-in-chief. And the experience that I bring, yes, as a soldier, as a veteran, but having served in Congress for nearly 7 years, focused on national security, serving on the armed services, foreign affairs, homeland security committees, made me ready and capable to walk in on day one, prepared to do that job as commander-in-chief, to bring about this sea change in our foreign policy so that we can make sure we're dedicating all of our resources that were being spent on these wasteful wars and weapons that don't do anything for our country but make us less safe, and dedicate those to serving the needs of our people. This is the kind of change we're talking about, and this is why you cannot separate foreign policy from every domestic issue that we face. The obstacles before us are great. There's a lot of people who feel threatened by this message and this change that we're talking about because they've profited off it for so long. The military-industrial complex, the private special corporate special interests. These are people who have been making a lot of money from being in holding a lot of power for a long time. That's got to end now. Now is the time when we, the people, need to lift our voices, to stand as one and fight for our future. Because no matter what the pundits say, no matter what the party bosses say, it is we, the people, who determine the outcome of our elections. It is we, the people, whose votes determine the outcome of our elections. So if we want a government of, by, and for the people, we got to bring about a government of, by, and for the people. This is what is at the heart of our campaign. We are a purely people-powered campaign. No PAC contributions, no lobbyist contributions. We have amazing people like you who are here, your energy, volunteering your time, your resources to be able to push this message forward because you recognize this is the change we need to see. So I want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart for your support. You've made it possible for our campaign to come this far. You are why our campaign is continuing to grow, and I'm counting on every one of you to continue to help spread that message. Because every one of you here is an influencer. That's a new social media term, right? Are you an influencer? Every one of you is an influencer. Every one of you has friends on social media or on your phone if you're not a social media kind of person. And so I want to ask for your help in continuing to spread this message. Share what's in your heart with other people about why you're here tonight. Even if you haven't made up your mind yet, you're here because you're interested. I hope to earn your support, and I hope to ask you to share that support with others so that we can continue to grow and build this movement. Thank you all so much for being here tonight. Thank you for everything. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Yes, we'll have time for a few questions. We'll start with you.
I'm actually a little bit starstruck, so I'm nervous.
What's your name?
My name is Cindy Mead. I live in Fulton, Illinois. My question is, and I'm going to read this so I don't mess it up, the Fairness Doctrine of the United States Federal Communications Commission introduced in 1949 a policy that required the holders of broadcast licenses both to present controversial issues of public importance and to do so in a manner that was, in the FCC's view, honest, equitable, and balanced. The FCC eliminated that policy in 1987 and removed the rule that implemented the policy from the Federal Register August 2011. We all know fake news is a really bad problem, and I know that there are, I don't think that there are many candidates talking about this issue, and I hope that maybe you could explain or share what you think would be a good idea to take care of or help get rid of the fake news problem that we have.
Is your question about the Fairness Doctrine?
Yes.
I think it's important for us to remember that the public airwaves belong to us. The public airwaves belong to the people. I think it's easy to forget that because when you look at the public airwaves, they're owned by really big corporations who make a lot of money off of our public airwaves, 6 corporations. I think we should bring the Fairness Doctrine back in place because what we're seeing too often, I have a hard time finding something that offers us just the news. Just the news, offering both perspectives, even if they may be controversial, but allowing us as viewers and as voters just to get the facts and information. Instead, what we see across many of these channels are opinions. They're basically talk shows. So I would support bringing the Fairness Doctrine back in place. Thank you. Great question. That's the first time I've ever been asked that. So I appreciate that you brought that up tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, sir.
One of the candidates mentioned connection between foreign policy and domestic policy. And we have a lot of Democratic candidates talking about gun control policy. Is it possible that we live in sort of a culture in which, these mass shooters are sort of growing up with years and years of war, not on television, years and years of valorization and killing that's going on? And that is there somehow, a connection between these two kinds of ideas? If we valorize troops all the time, which makes good sense, veterans have many holidays here, but each one of these killers seems to think that they are sort of justified. And we don't consider whether our wars overseas are really justified. So my question is very, very succinctly here is there a possible way that with the reduction of the military presence that the U.S. has around the world, we will see in many ways improvement in the domestic situation?
Thank you for your question. I'm going to disagree a little bit with the premise of it, and I'll explain why. I don't believe, and this is in my generation, and I enlisted after 9/11, this post 9/11 generation of veterans. I don't believe there's been a valorization of war. I think there's an important distinction to be made between the valorization of troops, as you said, versus the valorization of war. They're two very different things. And I'll tell you, as someone who's been deployed twice, and there are other veterans here who served overseas, what I have found is that most often it is veterans who have seen the cost of war who often speak up loudest for peace. And so on Veterans Day, on Memorial Day, really the celebration is one of service. It's one of service because those Americans who raise their hands to volunteer to serve our country are willing to make that ultimate sacrifice, to lay one's life down in service to our country. That comes from a place of love of country and love for our people. And that's got to be separated from the politicians who have very wrongly made those decisions, whether they be members of Congress or commanders-in-chief, to send those troops, dishonoring those troops by sending them on missions that are unworthy of their sacrifice, that do not serve the interests of our country, that do not defend and protect the American people, and in fact make our country less safe. That's on the politicians. That's not on our troops. That's something, obviously, that I've made very central to this campaign because it is connected to every aspect of our lives here. Now, your point about the tragedies that we continue to see with these mass shootings, you know, there are different motives that we're seeing behind some of them we don't know why they're doing what they're doing, but in many of the recent ones where the shooters have written up manifestos and made very clear, what we've seen in El Paso, for example, is a lot of hate and racism and bigotry driving these murderous acts. I mean, that's a very clear issue with our culture that we need to address. That we need to call out people and condemn those, such as President Trump, who's using his platform to foment this racism and stand as one to say this is not who we are. This is not who we are. Whether we come from different places, have different races, ethnicities, religions, orientations, all of that, this is what makes up this diverse fabric of who we are as a country. And we can't just speak up when it is quote unquote our people who are attacked. We've got to stand together and recognize all of us as Americans. Everyone is our people. Everyone is our family. We are all children of God. And that we must stand up to change this culture of hate and promote a culture of love and inclusiveness and kindness. This is the real culture change I think we need to bring about.
Wow. Aaron Comer.
All right, Aaron, you're on.
So one of the things near and dear to this community's heart is their small businesses. Without them, this area would still be a crime-ridden ghetto without them. But a lot of people are worried about a $15 minimum wage and concerned those might close down their businesses. But on the other hand, there are companies like Isle of Capri that I used to work for, a company that makes $2.7 billion a year, and yet pays their workers so little that their workers can't afford to take maternity leave. How are you, as Commander-in-Chief, going to be able to give those oppressed workers a livable wage without closing down these other smaller businesses that actually give a darn about the people of this community?
Great question. You looked over here before you were about to say a different word. Thank you, Aaron. Thank you for your question. This is a really important question. My parents are teachers by trade and training. That was their first job out of school, but they're entrepreneurs at heart. So when I was a little kid growing up, I was 7 and 8 years old, my parents started a family deli. I have 3 older brothers and a younger sister, and all of us pitched in. All of us helped out. They were small business owners, and I was wiping tables and sweeping floors, and that was my first paycheck. I got paid $6 every 2 weeks. $6 every 2 weeks. That was a lot of money for me. But I understand how hard it is for small businesses to stay in business, but also how much heart goes into a small business like this one, and how much value it brings to our community. I think it's something like 99% of the jobs created in this country come from small businesses, truly the backbone of our economy. And yet you don't see that represented in our federal policy when it comes to taxes and when it comes to trade. Instead, where do those benefits go? You've got a small business owner, like Brian here is the general manager, and they struggle just to get by. You're paying your taxes, you're paying your overhead, you're paying your staff, you're trying to take care of the community, and yet you've got a guy like Jeff Bezos with Amazon who gets away with paying nothing in taxes. Nothing. Not only that, but he gets over $100 million in a tax credit. So how is it that we've got a system that helps a guy like him, who's already one of the wealthiest men in the world, yet small business owners are left at the short end of the stick? This is the problem, again, with who has the influence in Washington, who's making the laws. This is the paradigm shift that we need to see. The same with our trade policy. Disproportionately impacting and benefiting multinational corporations, taking away American jobs, and negatively impacting our communities, our economy, small business owners. So I'll be rolling out soon in the course of my campaign the specifics of my policies, but I will fight for a living wage, especially with those big corporations like Walmart, where I love Capri, is that where you used to work? But making sure that we are making it possible and incentivizing being able to pay your workers and not being punished for small business owners especially. So whether it's again, we're working out the details, will come out, but whether it's a carve out for small business owners or making it tax deductible for them to be able to pay their workers more, we've got to change the shift so that we're not incentivizing capital and instead incentivizing the paying of our working men and women. Yellow shirt.
Okay, I'm married to an immigrant, and she has an immigrant child. I spent several $1,000s to get them here. They have green cards, it's all legal. And I live in fear of just about every day that somebody's going to come and get them, even though they're legal. Would you support abolishing ICE and reforming our immigration laws? I know you touched on that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your question, and I'm sorry for the fear and uncertainty that you and your family are going through now. There are unfortunately so many families who are in this situation, and it's not unfounded fear, right? Because I feel like almost once a week now we hear a news story about a U.S. citizen or a green card holder who was stopped and detained for days or even sometimes weeks just because of their skin color or their accent, right? This undermines who we are as Americans. This requires an overhaul of our immigration system. Really, the buck stops with leadership. We are in this position because of who occupies the White House today. And allowing ICE to run rampant, really without any guidance or boundaries, just saying go, this is the reason why we're in the situation that we're in today. I don't believe abolishing ICE is the answer, and here's why. If you take away this agency called ICE, those enforcement responsibilities will simply be shifted to other agencies, whether they're in the federal government or the state level or at the local level. Under this leadership, that's what will happen. You can get rid of the agency, but the problem is with the laws and with the leadership of who's enforcing the laws. So yes, I will completely overhaul ICE, look at the situation that we have, and fight for real reform of our immigration laws. What is happening now is not lawful. It's not lawful. There's no reason why U.S. citizens or legal residents, whether they be green card holders or others, should be getting detained, arrested and detained for absolutely no reason whatsoever. What to speak of our veterans? facing the same situation. People who have served our country in uniform, put their life on the line, serving overseas, surviving combat, coming home, only to be detained and then deported, kicked out of the country that they've put their life on the line for. So this ultimately comes down to leadership, and it comes down to bringing about the kinds of reforms that we need to see in our broken immigration system, and enforcing the laws that actually represent the values of who we are as Americans. Thank you.
I'm a local educator, so I always just have one simple question that I ask everyone, politicians. What are we going to do to close the skills gap? Or as I like to call it, the straight up opportunity gap that the youth of America is heading straight into?
This is such a great question, especially as we head into the automation revolution that is quickly upon us. There is a major gap between the skills that are needed to be prepared for this huge change in our whole society that's already begun, and the training and the skills that are being provided. I think there's a couple of things that we've got to do. First of all, invest more in vocational training in community colleges, because some people don't choose a 4-year degree, which is just fine. They want it ready to go and work in the workforce. We've got to make it so that those opportunities are readily available, not just in certain big cities or communities, but in communities across this country. I first started out in a community college when I went to school, and I was studying TV and film production. That was what I was looking to do back then, and I got a great education doing that. I later went on and earned a 4-year degree, and thankfully had the GI Bill to help me pay for it. But this is an opportunity that exists for everybody. We've got to have a better linkage between industry and our community colleges and vocational training to include apprenticeships. I've seen great examples here in Iowa. I visited a few community colleges like DMAC and Kirkwood who are working very closely with the renewable energy industry. And they are training people who are walking out of that community college, whether it's in a 6-month certification or a longer course, and going in and getting a job that's paying $18-20 an hour, training for this new economy. So we've got to have more of this interoperability to make sure that we are closing that skills gap, with even starting it as juniors and seniors in high school, being able to identify, hey, what do you guys want to do? Do you want to go and get further education? Do you want to go and get a job? And not stigmatizing those who don't want to get a bachelor's degree. There's nothing wrong with that. I think that's one of the biggest problems with the culture that we live in now, and that's driving so much of the student debt crisis that we're facing, because kids are told, hey, you're not going to be able to get a job unless you have a bachelor's degree, and worse yet, you're not going to be able to get a good paying job unless you have a master's degree. Yet we're seeing people who are graduating with their bachelor's and their master's, they're still not able to get a good paying job. So this is a culture problem that I believe we need to change. When we go back in history and we look at what universities used to be, it was more of a status thing. You went, and it was called finishing school back then. You went to finishing school. It was something that wealthier kids did because that's what their family's, a status symbol. While other folks went and got apprenticeships and got training and went to work. But somehow we've gotten to a place where it's now a status thing, where you go into huge amounts of debt. So you've got this piece of paper, but is it giving you that skill that you want to be able to fulfill your hopes, your dreams, the kind of work you want to pursue? So we have some bigger work to do here that speaks to our society changing the culture and expectations of our young people, while also providing those practical skills and opportunities for those who choose them. And thank you for being a teacher, by the way. That's awesome. Yes.
I have a question, but this 16-year-old young man came all the way from Peoria, Illinois, and he has a question.
All right.
Hi, as he said, I'm from Peoria, my name's Adi, and I have a question about your interpretation of the First Amendment and free speech, because what I'm seeing a lot, people's careers and other aspects of their life are severely affected by things they have said or appear on social media. So I'm wondering, where's the line between free speech? I mean, where do you draw the line between free speech and, I guess, hate speech? And should it be illegal? And can social media posts be used in that same context as verbal speech?
Great question. This is an important question for the examples that you raised, but also in how our free speech is being limited now. Like you said, the question is, should hate, quote unquote, hate speech be shut down and limited, or is that protected under free speech? This is something we've seen, Facebook, Twitter, and others. We see certain people's accounts being canceled or shut down because of things they've tweeted or posted, and it begs the question, where is the line drawn? To me, the line is drawn very clearly, that our free speech is free speech, whether you're saying something that I agree with or disagree with, whether you're saying something that I find to be completely abhorrent, your free speech is protected unless that speech is used to incite harm on others. That's been made very clear through our courts and through our laws. And I think it's a really dangerous trend that we are seeing now, where people are very quick to shut down the free speech of others who they disagree with, or who maybe make them feel uncomfortable, who come from a different background or a different party or a different ideology. To me, that undermines the very principle of our foundation as a country and the freedoms that we cherish, the freedoms that men and women in uniform throughout our country have given their lives to protect. So whether it's the free speech we're protecting within our community or the free speech that we're protecting online, we have to be as willing to stand up to protect that free speech for those we agree with, just as we are for those who we disagree with. Great question. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Well, don't you think part of the problem goes back to the 2016 election when, be frank about it, enough Democrats did not turn out to vote in Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. And had they done so, we'd have Hillary as president, which would be good, and we wouldn't be faced with this problem of Donald Trump and the right wing.
I have a couple of thoughts about that. You're right. There were a lot of Democrats who stayed home. There were some Democrats who voted for Trump. There were independents who stayed home, some independents who voted for Trump. People, but to me the real question is why? Why is that? We've got to get to the root cause of the problem here if we want to seek to change it or to fix it. And I'll tell you what I hear from a lot of folks is that they feel like they were left behind. They were taken for granted. Their voices are not being heard. I saw a news clip that really made an impact on me after that election of a guy who's probably in his 40s, mid-40s, who was from Ohio. And his family had long worked in the auto industry. His father had been a union member, he was a union member, and they had been completely left behind. He said that he voted for Trump for his father, who lost his job and who felt like he lost all the pride and identity that he had in his life. And this guy had tears running down his face as he was talking into the camera. He said, I don't know what bad things Trump is going to do, but I'm voting for Trump to honor my father, even if it means turning the whole system upside down. So you can disagree with his logic, you can disagree with his vote, but if we want to bring about change, as we do, and win this election in 2020, you've got to understand why people stayed home, why they have lost faith and trust in our election system. It is not enough, in my opinion, for us as Democrats to run on a platform of saying, hey guys, vote for me, I'm not him. That's not good enough. That is not enough to motivate people to come out and vote for someone. And so the responsibility is on us, for every single candidate who's running for president, in my opinion, to make that argument to you, to make that offering to every one of you as voters about what I will offer as your president and commander-in-chief, how I will serve you, how I will fight for your interests, and how I will lead in a way that brings our country together. Because we cannot continue down the path that we've been on, pitting one side against the other. It is that kind of divisiveness that has gotten us in this place where we are today, with the challenges that we have that go unsolved. It is this kind of unifying leadership that I seek to bring.
I like the fact that you served in the Army.
Thank you. Thank you for your service.
It's a good branch of the service.
I agree. Go Army.
Hello. I have a sort of a follow-up question, actually. A lot of people did become disenchanted after the 2016 election.
Yeah.
And a lot of people that were feeling the burn felt burned. And so they voted for Donald Trump, even though they were independents. So I'm wondering what you're going to do to cause party unity, whether you are elected or not. How are you going to help us get our progressive platform on the stage? Yeah, and unify. Cheers.
By continuing to do what we're doing. I mean, this is why I'm running. This is why I'm offering to be that leader, to be that voice for the people, which is bigger than being the voice for the party or being the voice for one interest or another, but to be the voice for the people that can unify our country. We have Republicans and independents and libertarians and Democrats and Bernie-crats and progressives who come to every one of our events because we're not focused on pitting one team against the other, but instead fighting for the people and fighting for our country. That's at the heart of who I am and why I'm running for president. And for all of us, for me and for all of us, that motivation, that has to continue. These elections come and go. We can't lose heart and throw in the towel if things don't go our way, because there's too much at stake. There are so many different ways to continue to be involved, to serve, to fight for each other, and to fight for our future. And it's up to all of us to be able to continue to do that.
Hi, my name is Tom. It seems like at the root of so many of the good things we want to do is getting the influence of big money out of politics. And it seems like until we can do that, the system's going to remain broken. Just wonder what your thoughts were on how to start doing that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Ending this legal corruption, which is what it is in Washington right now, is at the heart of so many of these problems. I think there's a few things we can and should do right away. I think we should stop PAC contributions to every member of Congress. There's a number of us who don't take it voluntarily, so that's a practice I think we should end. Number two, we need to prohibit members of Congress from leaving their job and going and becoming lobbyists for the very industries that they were supposed to be regulating. Close that revolving door. Not only for members of Congress, but we see it with high-level regulators and senior staffers in the government. We've seen it with, the FCC. Somebody brought up the FCC earlier. You have the legal counsel for Verizon then going and becoming the chair of the FCC. How do you expect him to regulate the very industry that he just left? And I wouldn't be surprised once he leaves his job to go back and get a big payout from someone in those industries. You see the same thing in Wall Street. We have people working for Wall Street banks going then and serving in those regulatory positions. Yeah, sure, they take a pay cut for a little while, but they know what's there for them on the other side. Do we really trust them to serve our interests? I don't. So it's closing these revolving doors. See the same thing in the military-industrial complex. You see people in positions to write multi-billion-dollar contracts for these big defense contractors, write the contract, leave that job, then go work for the contractor not too long after. So these are the kinds of things that we've got to end. Close these practices, close the revolving door, and Citizens United. Bring about that big reform. We need to take big dark money out of our politics that's not serving our interests. Yes. I don't want to leave you guys behind back here.
Thank you very much. One question I'd like to ask you. Probably the thing I admire about you is your lifestyle. I'm a vegetarian. I'm 71 years old. I've never been in the hospital. Except for that little issue that, yeah. A little different. The healthcare issue, my wife owned a company in northern Missouri, and now she's in Florida. I look at the healthcare issue and the people, all right? It's not so much, you know, do we need more and more healthcare? We need a different lifestyle. We need somebody to lead us into a healthy lifestyle. And I believe that you can do it.
Thank you. This is a really important question because it gets below the surface, right? And we can talk about the superficial with healthcare and the rising cost of healthcare, and that we have more people getting sick in this country than staying well. And why is that? It's because we have a sick care system in this country. When you really look at it, does big insurance and big pharma make money when people stay well? Do they make money when they actually provide medicine that heals people? They don't. I think it's very telling. You're bringing up diet as one major element of this, the kind of food we put in our body. It floored me when I learned one day that our doctors, physicians, are not required to have any nutrition training when they go through medical school. None. That would seem pretty basic to me. I mean, I'm either eating food that's going to be good for my body, or I'm going to eat food that is bad for me. It's going to make me sick. Seems like my doctor should know something about that. So that speaks to kind of the center point of what you're talking about. And I think as we're talking about healthcare reform, we're talking about insurance, big pharma, but really when we look at reforming our healthcare system, let's actually make it a healthcare system that takes care of the health of our people and prevents people from getting sick in the first place, that incentivizes good, healthy living, that teaches people about how to do that. I've got some friends in Hawaii who own a farm. They own a small plant-based cafe, and their goal is to try to help educate people and inform people about how to make better choices for their lifestyle. So they implemented a program where they would provide 2 meals a day for free to people who are in a condition where they need help. I think they did it for a 3-month period under the supervision of a doctor. But one of the gentlemen who was part of their program, I think he was in his mid-30s, and he was morbidly obese and had diabetes. He was dealing with health issues that a 30-something-year-old should not have to think about. And so they provided him with 2 delicious plant-based healthy meals a day for free, and he loved it. Wow, this food is really good. And they said, okay, just make sure you're eating salad once a day. Okay, yeah, no problem, he told them. I already eat salad once a day. And he said, you do? And he said, yeah, macaroni salad. But he was serious. He was serious, eating those macaroni noodles with mayo and all that other stuff. The way he grew up, that was salad. He didn't know any different. So part of this is just really educating folks, and then it's also making sure that this food is affordable and it's accessible. There you go. All right, we're going to take one last.
Thank you, Andrew. Aloha.
Aloha.
Never forget. Can we talk about election fraud in the DNC and how they are controlling the narrative at this point in this country? 2016, obviously, was the only elected official who stood up and said no. Which is why I adore you and your honesty. We saw it again in 2018 in California with Dianne Feinstein. We've seen huge discrepancies between exit polling and reported polling. We've seen manipulation of polls, you being the latest victim, and I'm very sorry about that. How are we going to unroot Tom Perez, Donna Brazil, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, and these people who think that we don't notice that they're subverting democracy in this country and they're not listening to the people anymore?
Fire Pelosi! I have a very simple answer for you. Very simple answer. Get involved. Get involved. What we saw after the 2016 election was a lot of folks who were really frustrated about how things went in that election, who then ran to be their local delegates to their county Democratic Party, ran to be on the state central committee for the state Democratic Party, ran to be national delegates. And so when the time came about to start changing the rules, they had seats at the table. So did we make all the changes that we sought to bring about? No, we didn't. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. But as long as you are not engaged in the process, then you're not going to have a seat at that table. Other people will, and they will make the rules that don't serve you. So get engaged in the process. Call for transparency. If you're not one of those who is running, get someone else to do it. But continue to shine a light on what's happening and make sure that people understand the truth and make it widespread. Because a lot of times these things they try to do is say, nobody will notice, nobody will pay attention. Because a lot of time people haven't. For a long time people have not paid attention about why the Rules Committee of the DNC is so important. It's a really powerful committee that impacts our primary elections. We've seen that. So get involved and keep speaking truth to power. Thank you so much, everybody. It's great to see you all here. Tell your friends and family, Tulsi2020.com. I need every one of you to support. We are in this through the Iowa caucuses. We will be there, and I need your help.